Hi, everyone. This is YMP TV. And as you know, we've been speaking to those mining executives during this period of COVID-19 and just asking their thoughts on what's going on and where we are going. And this week is a bit special. We're interviewing women in mining. Today we have Ashley Kirwan, the co-founder and actually CEO of Oryx Geoscience, and also our 2020 YMP award winner. So happy to have you here, Ashley. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing.
Before we dive into a lot of the questions, I'll start with the regular question of how has COVID-19 impacted Oryx?
Yeah, so COVID has been a really interesting time. Like many other companies, we definitely started with focusing on the health of our employees. So right after PDAC for about 2 or 3 weeks, it was all about organizing the teams to come back from the field. We had projects in Quebec as well as Sudbury, and so we pulled our team back. And then fortunately enough, most of our work was already on our computers, and we're doing a lot of compilations and pre-field work. So we actually didn't have a lot of field work at the time, but yes, clearly it was all about the health of everybody. And then very early on, it was about communicating with all of the clients. We were very, very close with all of our clients and partners and just trying to navigate this. We realized that a lot of the groups that we work with still have to advance projects and they still have things that they have to do. So it was just about communicating with them and figuring out what can we do right now to still advance your project. Fortunately, all of our team has already been available to work remotely. We've got great servers and backups and that. So all of our team was able to work, like as soon as possible from home. And then very, very early on, after we made sure people were back from the field, we contacted the clients. We then got very creative. We have a lot of expertise, and then it was about aligning ourselves with the right groups and making sure that the industry knew that we were open, we're available, and we're here to help projects move forward.
Okay, and also it's interesting for a listener to know that, but you started your company in 2012 with your partner, Shastri Ramnath, during a slowdown cycle in the mining industry. How did you manage to do it and somewhat remain successful despite that?
Yeah, so we're not new to interesting times, for sure. We started a company in 2012, which was probably one of the worst times to start a company. And that, I think, just kind of shows our personalities, where we knew what we were going into and we still push forward. We definitely are the type of groups that look to build opportunities. And I firmly believe that in challenges, there are opportunities. And so what we did very early on is we identified a gap. So at the time in 2012, there were still a lot of companies that needed to raise money, and they had really great projects, strong management teams, but raising funds was really hard. And the groups that were able to do this had to show that they really understood their projects and they had a really sound geological story, which required pulling together data, doing compilations, in order to actually present to investors. And so a lot of groups didn't actually have any funds to actually move forward on all of this work. So we came through and we ended up taking a big equity stake approach at the time, where we did a lot of work for shares early on in order to get groups the sound geological understanding to be able to help present to investors to raise those funds. And then it made sense at the time when groups were able to secure financing and then they wanted to move forward on their exploration projects, that we had already built a strong relationship with them. So we then became an extension of that team. So at the time, we had to get creative with our business model, but it was always about quality of work, really understanding geology, and having a strong team. Our team is everything. We started with 3 individuals and we've grown over the last 8 years. And it really, really is about relationships and working with good people on great projects. And our goal at the time was really to push people to raise their own bar for understanding your own project. So every single drill hole, every single plan is very strategic. And so you're making use of all of these funds in the best possible way.
Speaking of funds, so Oryx provide geology, geomatics, software development, and also business support. But to access those geological services, like a lot of juniors companies need to raise funds. Do you expect that COVID-19 will have an impact on the financing of those junior mining companies that need your services?
Yeah, so even, pre-COVID was very tough, right, for a lot of people over the last few years. We're in an interesting position where, because we are a consulting company, we work with so many different groups from juniors, mid-tiers to majors. And so we kind of have a bird's eye view right now of all the different groups and what's happening across the industry. And fortunately, there were some groups that were able to secure financing right before. So they are in a good position. Their use of funds, though, are probably going to change. And now they need to, move forward cautiously and see how their plans may change. There's other groups that I'm noticing over the last few weeks that are still able to secure financing. And I do know another, a whole group that it is harder right now. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's COVID or if it's, a market crash because of other things. I still think the groups that have good management teams and that they understand their project, they have a sound geological story, are the ones that have a little bit of a higher leg up. The ones that are also able to communicate properly to investors why they're raising the finances, what they're actually going to do with it, and how they're able to increase shareholder value. That hasn't changed. It is going to be challenging, but I still think those groups that have a really strong management team that's respected in the industry, that's trusted, has a good reputation, are the ones that hopefully will be able to move forward on that and raising financings. So our business model, again, it is operating in terms of supporting multiple groups. The juniors, we right now do have a capacity to continue to do some work for equity. So there are some groups still that if they are having a harder time raising funds, we probably will take more of an equity stake approach with that. And then there's other groups who have been able to raise funds that will kind of work normally on a partnership basis for them.
And do you expect the impact of COVID-19 to increase the demand and appeal for technologies in the industry?
I think that there definitely will be a need. And so it's no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have. And, a lot of us know in times of disruption, that's when people get really creative because you have to, right? There's no other choice. And so in terms of things like remote work is definitely going to be a new norm across our industry and across our world. So I think a lot of people are noticing that, the internet is kind of cutting out, or they need to all of a sudden get secure servers and other backups. So I think the technology in terms of information security and accessibility is going to be something that groups are going to now realize is a critical component to your project and your company. And then things like automation and how do we maybe reduce the amount of people on site at one time. I think that will be something that we'll probably see in years to come. The other thing that I firmly believe will be really, really or is important and will be critical is a more innovative approach. So there's technology, which is great, and there's AI and machine learning, but there's still the fundamentals, and our industry has so much information still in paper formats even. And so I think if you're able to raise funds, they're going to be really accounted for, and they're really going to need to show how they're going to use every dollar in the best possible way. And, it's far less expensive to do a compilation project, to bring all your historical data together, do collaboration sessions, really pick the best possible multi-target drill hole before you actually drill to be able to use those funds wisely. So the technology, I think, will be there, but a different innovative approach to how do we really use our funds in the best possible way, I think will actually be will be critical.
So I think you did touch on my next question, but do you think the mining industry and mining companies in general will operate differently in a post-COVID world?
Yeah, I think that is the big question, right? That everybody is asking right now. And I think inevitably when something this big happens to every single person, every single country, everyone's impacted. So it has to change in some way. I think health, again, is going to be a really big focus, especially with a lot of projects that have fly in, fly out camps. they're in remote locations or in vulnerable communities, I think that's not going to be kind of a short-term fix. It's going to now be a new norm. And I don't know what that will look like, if it's longer rotations or if you're screening people on site. I think we just will notice that a lot of companies are going to be putting expenditures into more like health and that, and hopefully mental health as well. Remote projects still are going to be needed, right? There's ore deposits that need to be mined. And so it's now going to be up to companies to just see how can they do it responsibly, working with all the regulations and travel and things like that. I think in the short term, we'll see a lot of, conferences canceled and things like that and push, but that's more of a short-term thing. Exploration, as everybody knows, is remote. A lot of the times, if you're doing prospecting, you just have a couple of people mapping, or if you're doing a drill program, it can be more remote. So I think a lot of people right now are in this like wait and see, planning their programs cautiously, and then seeing what they can do based on the recommendations from health officials of how they can actually move forward on their projects. We're working with a lot of groups right now that are fully planning big exploration programs, but their start dates have just been pushed back. So instead of starting, in the spring, they're now starting or wanting to start in like, fall or late summer. There's still question marks around that, but I think people are optimistic, and they want to obviously operate safely and make sure that health is number one. So I think, moving forward cautiously is something that every group has on their mind right now. I think with M&As and partnerships, that's another big thing. Pre-COVID, we saw a lot of M&As. We saw a lot of interesting partnerships. And so I think in this kind of survival mode, or this stage right now that people need to get creative, I think we'll see some interesting things where other groups are partnering together. We might see more M&As. So I'm actually excited to see, the rest of 2020, but also 2021 brings to our industry.
So shifting gears a little bit and stepping away from COVID-19, this week I'm doing this special with Women in Mining. So we're asking my women executive a bit their thoughts, but also to share with us their experience. So how did you come about to become the CEO of your company?
Yeah, so I'm from Sudbury. I'm a geologist. I'm from Sudbury, Ontario, which is a mining community, but I was never really exposed to mining. I did go to Laurentian University, and I have kind of a classic story where it was my first year professor. I took a geology course, and I just got hooked. It was exciting. I realized that I can have a really exciting career. I can hike, I can be outside, and all these things. I was fortunate enough to be in school in a really great time where I was able to work all 4 summers. I worked for the Ontario Geological Survey. I worked for mining companies. And so by the time I graduated, I had a lot of experience already. So it was a natural transition to be able to work full time. I dove into any opportunity I could get. I was a sponge. So I worked in the mines, I worked underground, I did exploration, a lot of time in Sudbury. Then I did gold exploration in Nevada. I kind of entered the junior space, which was a whole other ballgame, and it was really exciting. And then in 2012, myself and my business partner, Shastri, were at kind of an interesting time in our careers where we were both either going to look for other roles, or we had a conversation around, do we want to start a geological consulting company? Because we saw that groups didn't have a big team, but yet needed to understand their geology and come up with a geological story. So we just kind of dove in at that time. And as a lot of people know, definitely the industry, it's all about relationships. So we very early on just contacted our friends, our colleagues, anyone that we knew in the industry, and it was all word of mouth. We've only really started to market Oryx over the last year or so. It's all been just conversations with people or past clients. So yeah, and then kind of I'm here right now. So Oryx has been a company now for 8 years, and we do work with a lot of different groups from juniors all the way through to majors. Our business has evolved, and I think it has to. Every year as we see if the markets are changing, we need to kind of pivot and move together. But we really, really believe in having a strong corporate culture. So we're not a typical consulting company where we hire and lay off and hire and lay off. We have a solid team. So our team, essentially becomes our client's team. And we either can work on everything. If there's a group that only has, one senior geologist, we could be the arm of your exploration team. Or a lot of groups have a full team, but they don't necessarily have the time or the resources to actually work on one specific question or challenge. So then we come in and we work well with that internal team to hopefully find the solution.
And
so yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far.
I bet. And I guess as a mining executive, what advice would you give to young professionals starting their career right now, which is a period of a bit of a crisis, and to those, I guess, who are thinking about joining the industry?
Yeah, it's a completely different time than when I joined the industry, but I have to say that this is a really fantastic industry. It's a great group of people. We are a resilient community, and we're a really driven and passionate group. So if you have that, if there's a reason that you chose to be a geology or enter this industry, I say stick with it. There will be opportunities. And so now is the time I would recommend to be a sponge. If you don't have a job right now and you're kind of looking, LinkedIn is a great spot to just see what's happening. There's a lot of webinars, there's a lot of interviews. You'd be very surprised if you message people on LinkedIn who you think like would probably never get back to you. A lot of people will. So if there's somebody that you want to reach out to just in terms of guidance or knowledge, or if you have a question for them, right now I would say build your network, build your connections, because that's where people end up entering our industry. It is really who you know. It clearly, there's skill sets and experience and things like that, but if you're just entering the industry, it's all about having integrity and being a sponge right now, reaching out to different people. And then if you do have an opportunity, if someone has asked you to do a role, whether it's on site or in the office, be open to anything. Be open to doing very, very tedious work even, or if you're doing data entry, if you're doing digitizing, if you're doing core logging, some of those fundamental skill sets are so important, and they're the building blocks for everything. Logging core, I believe, is one of the most important skills that anybody can have, but also drill hole data entry and things like that. So ask questions, build your connections, and be a sponge and say yes to any opportunities that come your way.
Those are good advice. So actually, before we end this interview, do you have any last piece of advice for investors out there that are listening to us?
So yeah, again, I do think that there are opportunities. What I'm doing personally and what, as a company we are doing is really just talking to people. We recognize that there are a lot of interesting things out there, and it's almost like we're doing a research project right now where I'm talking to producers, to operators, like all through the junior mining space, and there definitely are opportunities. I don't necessarily want to say like invest in this company or that company, but I would say read a lot, talk to different people. You'll see common themes emerging. And I guess my number one piece of advice is really look at who the team is. If they have a good track record, it means that if they're part of a project, they're going to be able to advance that project at some point. It may not be in the next 3 months because the whole world is kind of on pause right now. But if it's a good team, if they've put their own money into that project as well, that's a really good sign that they're committed, that they're not leaving anytime soon. So I'd look for track records in teams, and I'd also look at projects. If you're a geologist, if you just go to people's websites, or if you look at press releases and you look at maps and it's just assay grades without any geological controls, that to me is a red flag. I want to know the groups that I'm investing in understand their geology and they've got a proper strategy. So yeah, I'd read, ask questions, and do your own research on whoever's running those companies.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your time. I think it was great for our members to hear you speaking and doing this Women in Mining special this week.
Thank you so much, Bianca.
Stay safe.
You too. Okay, take
Bye.
care.